Everyone. So this is the Chapter 7 No Calculator Quiz Review that we worked on in class on Wednesday. And I'm going to go through, eventually I'll go through all of the problems. I think in this first video I'll shoot for like the first 1 through 9. I don't want to make it too terribly long. But I'm going to try to talk you through my thought process on each one of these and help you keep all of your rules and everything straight. Okay, so for number 1, we want to make sure that we're separating the 5 from the x, okay? And each one of them gets a power of 3, but that power of 3 works differently on the 5 than it does on the x, okay? For the 5, I'm really doing 5 to the 3rd power, which I'm hoping by now you can spout off the top of your head is 125. Here, I'm going to multiply my exponents, all right? So the x stays the same, and then that becomes an x to the negative 24th power, negative 8 times 3. And then this, the x to the negative 24th, because the exponent came out negative, needs to move down to the bottom in my final answer. So my final answer would look like this, 125 over x to the 24th power. I'll try to keep this as neat and organized as I can. We'll see how that goes. Okay, so in number 2, that one's a lot easier actually. It's just like this one, except it doesn't have a number in front and it doesn't have any negatives. I'm really just combining these two, okay, and making that m to the 35th power. And there's really not anything else I can do with it from there. That's just my answer. Okay, so on the next one, see that negative sign hanging out front? The fact that it's outside of the parentheses means I'm not going to touch it until the end, and I'm just going to make sure I plop that negative sign back in front of my answer. Okay, so going back to like what we did on number 1, I'm going to do 4 to the power of 2, which is 16. Okay, and when I do w to the 4th to the power of 2, right here I'm multiplying, so that makes w to the 8th. And again, if I've just got that negative sign sitting out front, that pretty much just transfers straight into my answer and makes it a negative 16. But that's not a negative exponent, so it doesn't move anywhere. It just stays right there. And there's my final. Okay. All right, next one is a division problem. When you're dividing, you subtract the exponents. And if you ever get kind of lost on one of these, picture 15 B's all lined up on the top row, 9 B's lined up on the bottom, and then you're crossing out all of them where they line up top and bottom. So you would end up with 6 left over. Your rule here is that you're subtracting. So this would become B to the 6th power. No negatives or anything crazy, that's just it, just your final answer. I really like that next one. That next one is a whole big blah, 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 all to the power of 0. Anything to the power of 0 is just equal to 1, big fat 1. Okay, number 6, you've got 2 separate things here. You've got a p and you've got a y to the negative 9th. There's really not any math to do here. There's not really any simplifying. But I can't leave this negative, right? So I'm going to take this y to the negative 9th and move it downstairs. I picked a bad pen here. So my final answer would look like p divided by y to the 9th. Okay. Sorry about that. Oh, that's final answer there. All right, number 7, we are moving right along here. Remember that power of 5 goes to the top and to the bottom. So on the top, I'm just going to get a to the 5th. On the bottom, I'm going to multiply my exponents, and that's going to become n to the 15th. And I can't subtract those two because it's not the same letter base. So that's just my answer. Okay, I looked at number 8 ahead of time. And I will warn you, it is pushing it a little bit in terms of what we can do without a calculator, but we're going to be brave and we can do this, okay? Very first thing I would do with something like this is split up that exponent into a lot of tiny pieces. I would make this 64 to the 1/2, and then to the power of 3, and then to the power of -1. By setting that up for myself, I'm giving myself step-by-step directions through the problem. Okay? 64 to the 1/2 is really 8. That's really like the square root of 64. So now we have 8 to the 3rd, all to the power of -1. This is where I question this problem, okay? 8 to the 3rd is bigger than what I would typically ask you to do without a calculator, okay? But like I said, we're going to be brave. So we know that we're doing, I'm going to go down here on the bottom. I'm just going to do this. We're doing 8 times 8 times 8. And we're smart enough to know that this is 64 times 8. Now, I want to show you what I'm going to do with the 64 times 8. I'm going to take the 64 and I'm going to write it as a 60 plus 4. Okay, so 64 is like 60 plus 4. And I'm going to multiply each one of those by 8. Because that's what's really happening. When you do 8 times 64, you're doing 8 times 60, 8 times 4. Okay? Well, 8 times 6 is 48, so this really makes 480. Plus 8 times 4 is 32. So now I'm doing 480 plus 32. Okay, I'm adding these two numbers together. If you need to do the whole like adding it, carrying it, all that stuff, be my guest. Let's see, that would be 0 plus 2 is 2, 8 plus 3 is 11, and then that would be 5. Or if you can just do 480 plus 32 without doing all that, that's fine too. Anyway, final answer is 512 there. So I end up with 512 to the power of -1. And then just remember that a power of -1 is going to flip this thing and make it a reciprocal. So it would be 1 over 512 as a final answer. Okay? So you should have been comfortable with everything else there except maybe this, but keep this in mind as a mental math strategy, that if you're trying to multiply something like 64 times a single number, you're really doing 60 times 8 and 4 times 8 and then just combining them, okay? Okay, and last for this video, let's look at number 9. Number 9, I would take this fraction and put a power of 4 on each of them. So p to the 4th over t to the 4th times. On this one, each one of these is going to raise to a power of 2, but that negative sign is going to make these switch positions. It's going to make the w go downstairs and the p go upstairs. So I'm going to end up with p squared on the top, w squared, excuse me, w squared on the bottom. Okay, now let's multiply straight across. On the top, this is p times p, so I can go ahead and combine those with addition and make this p to the 6th. On the bottom, those are different letters, so all I can do is make this t to the 4th and w squared. Okay, I can't actually combine them because they're different letters. And then that is my final answer. Okay, so that's it for this video. I will start up another video in just a second that does the other half of this worksheet.